Welcome to the Bros of Gardening. I am Mike Westphal, your host, joined always by my co-host, Daniel Van Dyke. How you doing today?
I'm good, bud. Just enjoying the fall weather. How about you?
It's been amazing out there. And of course, Alex is with us. He's going to help guide us through this conversation. Today, we are talking about even we make mistakes. Even the experts make mistakes. I think mistake or learning from people's mistakes is probably the easiest way to learn.
For sure.
I've learned so much from the people that work here at the garden centers, the hundreds and hundreds of years of experience, trying not to make the same mistakes that maybe they've made. But you still make them. And I think that's what the cool part about gardening is you're going to make mistakes. Don't stress over it. Learn from it because it's probably a simple solution, or it's finding out what the solution is. That's kind of makes it fun too.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to hear what you guys got. So who wants to share first? Personal experiences you've had.
Go for it, Mike.
I'll start off. So this is one that I've done probably multiple times before I finally said, okay, I got to stop doing this, is putting down something in the yard. Specifically, I think about it now because it's the fall season. Putting down grass seed because you see rain in the forecast.
Right.
And so you're like, get super excited. Oh, I got like 2 or 3 days of rain coming up. So I've spread my seed down, or maybe it's fertilizer. I've even done it with a mole repellent. So I put it all down. Rain comes, it's a gully washer. It washes everything, moves it all around the yard. You know, if you live on any kind of slope or any kind of, even just a fairly flat yard, the water is going to puddle somewhere. It's got to go somewhere. So it moves all the seed into one patch, and then you get this really nice patch of grass, and then everything else is barren. So so that's kind of my tip to people now. And whenever I teach a class is, hey, water it in. Like, you're going to be better off watering it in yourself than hoping and relying on Mother Nature to do it, because whether you never get the perfect rain. I shouldn't say that. I'll say 1 out of 10 times you get the perfect rain, which is a slow, drizzly kind of, all day, 2-day rain where you get, good, deep, nice watering where nothing moves.
Right.
But that's pretty rare. It seems like it's either a downpour or it says it was going to rain. Now it doesn't rain. And now we're not planning on watering. And now you got to pull out all the hoses and start watering. So it's like, just don't rely on Mother Nature to water your seed, your fertilizer, or your repellents, or whatever you might have laid down in.
Right.
Weed prevention.
Yeah. Well, that's a little bit of a sensitive subject because I literally just did that last week. So I seeded my front yard, and anybody that's in our Southeast Virginia area knows we got some torrential downpours at last week, and so I was trying to beat it. I wanted to get it down. I saw there was a lot of rain coming. I was like, oh, if I don't get it down today, it's going to be a while. And so I put it down thinking I got ahead of it, and basically starting back over from scratch now, because I do live on a bit of an incline, and I have a ravine to the side of my house, and I think we'll have some nice grass in that ravine in a couple of weeks, because that's where all the seed ended up. But it's funny because that kind of reminds me of some that I've made, obviously a little bit more in the landscape realm. But it kind of all comes back to drainage. I know we've talked about drainage in previous ones, but essentially it's more or less not accounting for drainage. Whenever we come in, you build a new bed, you build a new hardscape, whatever the case may be, you're changing the flow of water. You're changing how that yard reacts to rain and how it takes water and things of that nature. We also just had some really crazy high tides around here.
Yep.
We were prepping a bed, and all of a sudden we came back, and that high tide had taken a lot of the soil out. And so again, it's just those types of things where you don't know until you figure it out. But one that jumps to mind, we were putting in a wall, and kind of the rule of thumb is, if a wall is shorter than about 1.5 feet, you don't have to put drainage behind it, just because it does not take that much moisture. So essentially we put this wall in. It was only about 1.5 feet tall, but I wasn't paying attention to the grade of the yard, because it was a decorative wall. It wasn't a functional wall.
Yeah.
It wasn't meant to be a retaining wall. Well, sure enough, all that water kind of funneled down, and it came, you could barely see it, but water is always going to show you exactly where the lowest spot is. And all that water came down this hillside like a funnel, and it underwashed about 5 feet of this wall. And it only took literally weeks. A couple hard rains, and it took all of it out. And so that just went to remind me is, not only do you need to pay attention to your surrounding environment, but you definitely don't want to, even if you don't think it's necessary, really thinking through the process and looking at it. And obviously we went back, fixed it, put the drainage in, and it was fine. I mean, you can, like Mike was saying, there's a solution to most of these problems, even like downspouts and stuff like that, which we talked about on one of the other podcasts too. They might say, oh, we've never had moisture problems, we've never had water problems. Well, then you put a bed around it instead of grass. Grass isn't going to move, it's rooted in and stuff like that. But if you have just bare mulch, all of a sudden that mulch is going to wash, and you're going to have like a little, gully that runs through that bed where all that mulch washed out. And that's pretty much going to be on the first really hard rain you get, which isn't a very attractive look, and certainly not what the customer was hoping to see. So it's just trying to account for those things, even if, because my big thing is when you go in, you're changing the way that yard, like I said, you're changing the way that yard is, you're changing the layout of that yard, the permeability of that yard, everything is changing. And so essentially, you don't know how it's going to react. So you have to try to be forward thinking, but a lot of times you do have to be somewhat reactionary to it. And that's why when people call, I always tell designers, I tell all of our designers that work for us, I'm like, if there's a drainage problem, go out during the rain. Say, our appointment's Thursday at 3, but it looks like we have a hard rain coming Friday. How about I meet you Friday morning? You need an umbrella and some boots, but if you really want to see how it's going to react to that rain, I mean, that's the best time to do
smart.
it. So so it's just trying to think, and we have found out the hard way that yards drain differently than we thought. And so we've had to go back and certainly do some repairs because drainage and water is so fine. I mean, a half an inch difference, that water's not going to go where you think it's going, and that's just over a half an inch.
It's crazy.
You talk about lawn seed. I'm not an expert, but I screwed up my dad's complete process for the seeding. He had told me to cut the grass when I came home. You know how you have to lower the mower to get as low as possible? Well, he had already done it. So he'd already did all that. And I just, for some reason, thought, it's Thursday, I got to do the grass. So he did tell me to lower it. So I lowered it further than it was already lowered because he didn't reset it. And so I was like halfway done with the front lawn and this lawn seed everywhere. I was like 13, 14. And he's like, what the heck? I just did all this. And so needless to say, it was a long night.
What you tried to do for, it's pretty sure you gave for trying to be helpful.
Sorry, Dad.
It's funny. I mean, you make these mistakes and it's not the end of the world, and you try different things. I mean, I've definitely put down seed and then it moved it all over, and then I've gotten out there with a rake and like I'm trying to rake it back into the bare areas before it germinates. I mean, it's amazing when you put down grass seed and you get a good rainfall, it'll germinate like almost, it seems like overnight, like within like 4 to 5 days it'll germinate, but it might not germinate in the right spot. So I say water. Get up. You need to get on the watering regimen anyways. So might as well water it in. And then, I mean, the drainage issues are, you're right. I mean, I've noticed it now. I've been in my home almost 8 years now. And I think I mentioned it when we were talking about drainage in past episodes, that all of the water on my driveway funnels to my backyard and just washes down through the middle of my backyard. So now I know where I might need a dry riverbed or something.
There you go.
So these things that you learn.
I mean, have you guys ever had any issues with like houseplants in particular?
So I have a good story. It was when I first really started working at the garden centers. I'd probably been at the garden center for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years. And so I, done some yard work, done some different things, pruning trees, collecting Japanese maples. And I finally said, you know what, I should get some houseplants. I was living in an apartment with my brother at the time. And so I bought all of these houseplants. I don't even know how much I spent. To me, it was a lot of money back when I was just working at the garden center. And I was probably 10, maybe 15 different houseplants. Wow. And I went and I planted them all in these nice big pots and put them all throughout our apartment. And I was like, this looks awesome. Like, this looks amazing. Within a month, I think none of them were alive anymore.
Not a single one?
Come to find out, which I didn't know at that point, because I was really investing my time in like trees and shrubs and a little bit of perennials. And so come to find out, if you take a small indoor plant, a house plant, let's say a 6-inch plant, and you put it in a 14-inch planter, then it's certainly going to cause some major problems, because now I know better that all of that extra soil has no way to dry out. So it's just like, I always now I use the analogy of like, stand in a bathtub for 2 days and see what happens without moving. Your feet are going to rot off. So that's, if you've ever heard root rot, that is what you're basically causing, because all that excess soil has no roots. Your inside, which doesn't have wind or direct sunlight to cause evaporation. So this extra soil is basically like standing in the bathtub all day long, which is your roots are just sitting in water. So all that excess soil ended up killing all of my houseplants. And of course, I was not going to be the one to return all my houseplants as an employee of the garden center. I was so I just sucked it up, learned my lesson. Of course, all those pots were great pots that I could use outside. So I just kind of went back to what I really knew. Now I'm back into houseplants. And I think I've probably got about 30 houseplants now.
You're like, it's safe to return now. I've got
now
some experience.
I learned my lesson. I literally bring them home in the planter that, I bought them in and grow them for as long as I really can before I'm like, okay, I need to upgrade the size. And then you upgrade just gradually. So a 6-inch to an 8-inch, an 8-inch to a 10-inch, and you just gradually build up. You can't expect the same results that I experienced in outdoor plants, which is go plant that Japanese maple in a big 15-gallon pot. You'll be fine for 10, 15 years. It'll just grow right there, which is true. In indoors, not the same case.
And so I literally didn't do the exact same thing, but I had a similar issue with, again, I kind of came up, obviously, like I mentioned, working with Mike in trees and shrubs, and then I started working landscape, where it's all about watering. And we've talked about it before, water.
Yep.
Like you got to water everything in. Those first couple weeks, especially first couple months, summer heat, it's all about watering. And kind of what we always tell people is we amend the soil, we do everything. So all you have to do is water. So just in my mind, I was so ingrained watering. So I got some houseplants. Well, houseplants aren't as big of fans of water.
Right.
That's why they're houseplants. They're designed to withstand those types of things. So I plant a bunch of houseplants. They start to not look so good. And so normally in landscape, I'm like, okay, these people aren't watering enough. It's underwatered because new plants, it's tough to overwater in the landscape, especially in the summer. And I'm thinking, all right, I keep my houses warmer, like whatever the case may be. So I start to overthink it and I start watering these. And I just killed every single one of them. Every single one of them was dead. And then I pull them out of the pots because I'm like, I don't know what I did, but I don't want dead plants sitting here. And they're just dripping with water. And I was like, oh, they've just been sitting. And like Mike was just saying with the shower reference, the bathtub reference, the same concept. They just sat there in water. They weren't big pots, but I was filling those pots up pretty frequently with water because, again, I just thought, okay, every 3 or 4 days you water your plants, and that's just I was young and I didn't have a lot of experience with it, and I never really worked with houseplants in the garden center. And so, even now, I'll still ask Mike, advice when I'm looking for types of houseplants, because a lot of people, that's the biggest difference is, like Mike was saying, is these houseplants, a lot of them, they don't have a place for the water to go. So if they don't want a big saucer underneath with water in it, a lot of the pots don't have drainage in them. But the reason being is that the plants don't need a lot of water. So you can still water them in a pot without drainage, and they'll be completely fine. But if you overwater them, you're going to figure out pretty quick that you overwatered them. So that was one that I did where it came back to bite me pretty hard. I lost all my houseplants, and it might not be popular to say, but I now have a fake houseplant in one of my corners. But I got some real ones now, and I've done a little bit better on them. But I'm still learning about houseplants every day. I can promise.
With that big houseplant boom that happened 2018, 2019, roughly. I learned a great deal, and I started trying again and started collecting some more. And so what the biggest, almost 9 times out of 10 when a customer brings or has a houseplant issue, it's always the first question that we ask, how much are you watering it? Because it's almost always that. It's almost always overwatering because we baby our plants, and outside you can water all day long. And even you mentioned working, I worked in the garden center, and I see us. And I've done it. I've watered our houseplants, and you can water them daily because it's a greenhouse, right? And you've got heat, and you've got evaporation, and you've got wind because you're opening up the sidewalls of the greenhouse, or open up the roof of the greenhouse, or all these different things. And you just don't have that in your home. And so in your home, my best advice is water. Wet dry cycles aren't for every single houseplant, but a majority of houseplants are water it, let it dry out. Water it, let it dry out. And it really, really helps. And having a somewhat root-bound plant is not a horrible thing in an indoor plant. So you learn these things over time, and I learned my lesson, and now I'm definitely on my way to having a nice houseplant collection, and I enjoy it.
Have any customers come in saying I'm watering these plenty, and I don't see what's happening?
Oh yeah, and I always tell people don't get on a watering schedule. I water every Sunday. because I'm home and that's what I do. That's probably the worst thing you could do is get it, because even during different times of the year, like in the winter, you run your heater, right? So heaters are actually going to dry out your plants a little bit faster in the winter, which you would think, oh, my plants don't need as much water in the winter. And then some people have success for a long period of time. I always water my plants on Sunday, and so they have success with that for a long time. And then all of a sudden something changes, whether, they moved it to a different office or a different place in their home, or they upgraded into a larger pot. Watering requirements change. So there's lots of those different things. And that's part of, I think, one of the most exciting things that I get to do is work with customers and try and diagnose what the problem is. And unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, and in my case, it was watering.
Yeah, well, and like Mike said, even just one of the biggest changes I noticed, even with mine that I've gotten back into it, is just in relationship to where the air comes out. So like if your air duct is blowing down and it's right underneath that air duct, sitting by a window, whatever the case may be, it's going to dry out much faster than one that's not. And so those little changes in the house that you don't think about. But same concept, if you have a super windy area outside, where you're planting in the landscape, it's going to have a different reaction to that environment. So it's just the littlest changes in houseplants make the biggest. And again, that regimented watering, that's exactly what I want you to do when you're in the landscape. You get on that schedule.
Like trained to say
and so, but then it's like, like Mike was saying, that's not what you want to do. So it's just kind of rethinking. Obviously, it's all plant material. It's all living and growing stuff. But, you have to treat it differently and kind of rethink how you approach that.
So something I've been thinking about, Daniel, is you're out in essentially the wild and the nature.
That's what I tell myself.
At these landscape projects, do you ever run into like any wildlife issues or?
Yeah, so that was another one. It's funny, you talk about mistakes, and this was a very expensive mistake. So we had a property that we were doing a very large home up in, like I said, in our area. It's a neighborhood in Williamsburg called Kings Mill, and it's a very it's a golf course community. It's a beautiful community, but they're all about like wildlife. They have a lot of open areas. Like I said, it's a golf course, so there's a lot of wildlife around. The homes aren't super packed in there, so there's a little bit more space and stuff like that. So we had this property, and they were having kind of a housewarming party. And again, a very large property, a lot of bed space. And so we had planted, he literally bought 3 properties that were all next to each other. He put his house in the middle, and he wanted to plant the 2 properties on either side of him as a forest, quote unquote. So we planted, I think it was about 150 trees and on either side of the house. And then for this housewarming party, as we were like gearing up to do everything, we planted about 700 pansies. Well, anybody from this area knows that pansies, and we had we had this conversation, but we probably underestimated how aggressive they were in that area. And so we planted 700 fully colorful pansies on a Friday afternoon, and on Saturday evening when the party happened, there wasn't a bloom left. Every single pansy had been eaten to the ground by the deer in about 24 hours. And so we planted every single one of them, and every single one of them got eaten, literally. And that was, we even tried like some deer spray. And like I said, a lot of it works. Our problem too was we were putting it down, but then there was irrigation and it was being watered. So I think what happened is we put some spray on it to try to deter the deer, and then it got watered before it dried, and it washed everything off. So that was step 1 of the issue with the deer.
Step 1?
So then we come back, and I don't know, I didn't know this at the time, but I figured out the hard way that is also when deer rut their antlers. They rub their antlers on trees to, as they're like, I guess they're growing, whatever I don't know. But so they went up to all these hundreds of trees we planted. And when these trees are smaller, they might only be an 2-inch caliper. Right. And they rubbed them so hard that they were snapping them in half. Yep. And so they were literally snapping these trees in half. So needless to say, I had some choice words for deer there for a couple months, but we learned the hard way that you really got, that's one of the first questions we ask now. Do you have deer problems? And that's more of like in our area, the peninsula, but even on the south side, rabbits. There's all that kind of stuff, especially when you're like installing vegetable gardens. That's one of the advantages of doing raised gardens versus, gardens on the ground is there's a lot more pests and critters that can get to it. So, squirrels and bird feeders. We talk about birding and everything. Mother Nature's got a lot of different components to it, and when you're planting like in the wild, as you said, which I like that. But when you're out in the wild, you have to pay attention to that kind of stuff, and we have definitely learned the hard way that especially if they're hungry enough, if they're desperate enough, they're going to pretty much eat whatever.
Well, it kind of sounds like you created a party.
Oh, we had a buffet. I mean, we had a
Before the
buffet
actual
for
people
them.
showed up for the housewarming party.
They thought they had gotten to an oasis there. They were just like, "This is everything we need. We got plenty of food.
Where'd this
We
come
can
from?"
rub our antlers," which again I didn't even know was a thing. And so we had to go out and build these. We put 3 stakes around the tree and built like these wire fences around the tree. And once the tree's mature enough, they can rut them without damaging them. But if you take the bark all the way off of the tree all the way around, you're going to kill the tree. The tree can't get it.
And deer love new things, right? So it's like, new little tiny trees. They love about that 1.5 inch caliper. They love it. They love new food.
The foliage
options.
is low enough they can eat off the bottom branches of the tree. Yeah.
So, I mean, definitely, you can have a lot of those nuisance issues when it comes to wildlife. And some of it you enjoy and want, and some of it you're like, oh, I didn't know this was here. I mean, and I always say big properties, big problems.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much stuff that goes into it.
I mean, my first home was a small home and I loved it and it was so easy to maintain. And then I bought a home with a slightly bigger yard and man, I mean, just big problems and it becomes daunting sometimes.
Yeah.
So, and then I think there was another component. I don't think it might have been the same property but I know you've had the issue before of like, oh, we're planting all of this stuff. And man, there's lots of moles out here. There's lots of mole tunnels. And so I know we're eventually someday maybe going to do a podcast on mole and vole. Well, I'll give you an earful and all that. But moles typically eat Japanese beetle grubs. And Japanese beetles eat plants. So you go out and you plant all these elms. I think that's
exactly what I think it was like 60 of them that lined the entire property.
Wow. So 60 elms, which Japanese beetles absolutely love. And then so they planted, I think, went through it when maybe it was in the fall and then went through. And then in the spring and summer, when the Japanese beetles hatch and turn into the beetle from the larva stage, they come out and they just ate up.
I mean, it literally looks like lace, like lace leaves.
I
mean, the leaves are just gone.
Yeah,
and it's just an outline of the veins. I mean, and again, we started with fairly large ones. They're like 15 feet tall, starting out, which is a very large tree. And I mean, they were just toasted. Yeah, it was crazy. We learned a lot on that property.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It was a real buffet for everybody.
Yeah,
everybody won that wasn't a human
for sure.
Well, Mike, any other stories you've got?
I'll say, and maybe closing, I mean, I've got a couple more, but I'll say like the final one that I'm currently going through, which sometimes you don't always find out what the answer is, or you're constantly working on the answer or trying to figure it out. And I deal with this with customers all the time, is I am now on my second foundation planting at my home. First one was boxwoods. Love boxwoods.
Yes.
One of my favorite shrubs.
Boxwoods.
And I planted it's a really small space. So it's like a maybe 3 feet, but probably more like 2 foot, confined by a sidewalk leading up to my front door. And so I wanted some small evergreen shrubs in there just as a foundation planting.
Right.
And so I planted baby Jim boxwood, not to bash baby Jim, but, and I don't know now I don't know if I knew the answer, which was I thought I got a blight because I started losing chunks of the boxwood. So I would prune it. I would, use a fungicide. I thought I had combated it. It became an issue where it's like they just started looking gnarly because I kept on chopping chunks of them out of there. So I said, I'm done with this. I'm going to plant hollies. Hollies are easy, right? So I got a soft touch holly, knowing that it probably was a little bit too small of a space, but meaning I would just have to prune them a little bit more. And maybe I don't get, 15, 20 years out of them. Maybe I only got 8 to 10 years. I'm fine with that. So I plant all of these this spring. I know how to water. I know how to take care of plants, right? I know what I'm doing. But they're struggling. And I don't know why. And they're kind of doing a similar thing to the boxwood, which is like I'm losing chunks of it. I don't know why. One of them I found like almost like a fungal growth, but it was like in the heart of the plant. Like it looked like a mushroom almost growing out of it, which, there's like millions of different types of fungi. So I don't know if it's that. I think it's my soil. I think that's what I'm getting to is and I've amended. I put compost and perlite in. but it's very sandy. I mean, when I dig in it, it's like shovel goes right through. It's like butter.
Right.
It's like so easy to take out those boxwoods, so easy to plant these. So I think it's very, very sandy. And I'm sure it was probably more of like a fill dirt when they built the home that just has stayed in this little confined space. And so, I never recommend taking all of the dirt out. But I think I've been adding perlite and compost, which help break up. I think I might need peat, which would help hold some moisture in.
Retain some of it.
So some of the soft touch have made it. So I've got to replace some this fall because fall is a great time to plant. So I'm going to try that and try amending those holes. And that's part of this trial and error thing that we call gardening is you're going to make mistakes. And even I make mistakes. I mean, to keep it in my yard, the other one is planting under a large tree. I have 4 gigantic oak trees in my front yard, which take up a fair amount of space. And I love plants and I want to plant plants. And so I went out there and I said, I'm going to pick some of the most hardcore shade loving plants, mondo grass, hellebores. I can't remember the name of the grass now, but it's kind of like a swamp grass type of thing, but not swamp. It really can take anything. It seems like I can never kill it. It's like a sedge. It's a type of sedge. I plant all these plants in kind of like groups, mass planting underneath all of these trees. Yeah. I ended up ripping all that stuff out because because those trees are so massive, they absorb every bit of moisture. And so I was either out there watering all the time. And so I eventually just said, you know what, I'm just going to mulch them. I'm just going to mulch it. I have a couple bird baths out there, maybe some statuary in the future. But I just kind of said, hey, until I either decide to take these trees down or give it another go, you know what I ripped out of there that was living? Was ivy. So I could go back with ivy if I want to. There's a couple other options. I know that things can grow under those. It's just also a little bit of like, hey, I work in a garden center. Daniel Landscape. When you get home, it's like
the last thing
the shoemaker's son with no shoes. Is very similar to us. Sometimes we don't want to work in our yard, so we look for easier options sometimes in our own yards, right? Which I think helps kind of determine things that maybe we didn't know. Which is, I think I can do this. I want to do it. Okay, maybe I don't want to do it. I'm not doing it. So that's kind of some of the thoughts that go through my head when I'm dealing with my mistakes and issues.
And that's exactly what I tell customers all the time. I mean, they'll call up and say, "Hey, what am I doing wrong?" And I'm like, sounds like you're doing everything right, but then you don't know, like Mike was saying, he obviously knows exactly what to do, knows how to do everything, and you still have issues. And so trying to explain that to customers can be frustrating when they are taking the time to do it right. And but you live and learn. I mean, you can have your best laid plans of mice and men. You plant up underneath all these trees, you pick the perfect in your mind, which should be a perfect specimen for it, but you can underestimate the environmental challenges, whether it's a tree, a deer, whatever the case may be. You can try to take the steps to do it, and it's not going to work. I mean, sometimes Mother Nature wins. So
Mother Nature sure has its way sometimes,
and sometimes we don't have the answer. I mean, and that's unfortunate, but that's part of this, where there's so many variables that can go into it. I mean, I always tell people, you plant 30 plants in a row, you're probably going to lose one. And we might not even know the reason. Like sometimes they just transplant just doesn't like its new home and it's just not going to make it. Yeah. So it's knowing that a little bit ahead of time and knowing that you're going to run into some issues. And the best thing is learn from them. Yep. And I mean, that's where I go back to like your local garden centers and your extension agents and your landscape designers and your landscape installers and all of these different people that you could talk to and learn from so that you learn from our mistakes before you make them yourself.
Well, that's the thing. Like mistakes is, I think, especially in this type, when there are so many extenuating circumstances and factors, of course. Mistakes is a loosely used term because you can do everything correct, like we were just talking about. But so it's like, did I make a mistake? I don't know if it was a mistake as much as maybe underestimating something or an issue. And so, but yeah, I mean, people ask all the time. I'm sure you get it too, Mike. It's like, how did you just study every day? Like, how do you learn it? I'm like, no, I learned this because I made the quote unquote mistakes because I went through it. I saw things that had issues, and that's how I kind of developed my plant palette and all those types of things. Is what causes me the least amount of issues. And what helps solve problems. So that's what I said is I've just learned it because, like we've talked about, we've been doing it for over 20 years now, and so you pick up a few tricks of the trade along the way from your own mistakes and issues that you have. So just if you learn from it, then it's hard to call it a mistake.
Well, if I get a yard one day, I know who I'm calling.
You're gonna know it. You're gonna know it all by the end of the podcast. What are you talking about?
We'll see.
You'll be good to go.
You've got a resource.
I do. All right.
All right. Perfect.
I think that's it.
Well, thanks, guys. All right. This was fun. So, we all make mistakes, but we learn from them and we grow from them.
Absolutely.
Pardon the
there you
pun.
go.
There you go.
All right. Thanks for enjoying this podcast with us. I hope you enjoyed it. Of course, you can watch us on YouTube and you can rate, review, subscribe to anywhere you get your podcast from. And next week, we're going to be talking a little bit about, hey, it's fall. Why is fall the best time to plant? Why do we think it is? Why do we keep saying it? So we're going to get into that discussion next week. So we hope to see you then. Bye, everybody.